I am starting to absolutely adore Priti Patel. Not only is she a fine-looking lady, but she seems to crush her opponents with the ruthless efficiency of Genghis Khan with a smirk on her face. The best part is that she's on my side. She's completely opposed to everything that Labour and the Liberal Democrats want. And as she tears down their dreams of a borderless, socialist, feminist world, she does it in style. If you don't know who she is, she's the Home Office Secretary, so she's in charge of domestic policy for the UK, and she's doing a really fine job of it. For example, on day one after Brexit, she's going to end freedom of movement for people from the EU. Now, you might think, if you're leaving a political union, then obviously the people who are in that political union cannot just freely come or go in and out of your country, because that would imply that you're not two separate countries. I mean, immigration was a massive issue that Brexit revolved around, and this would seem to be a way of ensuring that Brexit is being delivered. This is precisely what I would want her to do, along with the now I think it's 54% of people who also want us to leave the European Union. Not only does she have a democratic mandate for this, it's the right thing to do. This is from the Home Office's own fact sheet on the subject, and it's pretty clear. We are leaving the EU on 31st of October come what may. This will mean that freedom of movement as it currently stands will end on 31st of October when the UK leaves the EU. Crystal clear. Absolutely crystal clear. EU citizens will still be able to come to the UK on holiday and for short trips, but what will change is the arrangement for people coming to the UK for longer periods of time for work and study. Details of other changes immediately after the 31st of October and improvements to the previous government plans for a new immigration system are being developed. Unironically, Yas Queen Slay. Do you understand? That is precisely what I want to happen. I would like some sort of Australian-style points-based immigration system. I do not want anyone to be able to simply come to the UK and work and study for as long as they want. I think that this sort of thing should be controlled. If they're going to be able to do that, then they should have a visa, they should have a reason, they should have some oversight from the UK government to make sure that we can control the number of people coming. Because that's what this is really based on for me. It's the sheer number of people. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has been clear that he wants to introduce an Australian-style points-based immigration system. Brilliant idea. Totally support it. The Home Secretary is commissioning the Independent Migration Advisory Committee to examine this. We will take back control of our borders while welcoming the talented and hard-working people that the British economy needs. Bravo. That's fine. I'm very happy with this development. The Prime Minister has made it clear that all EU citizens resident here by the 31st of October will be welcome to stay, and they are eligible for the EU settlement scheme. More than 1 million people have already been granted settled or pre-settled status under the scheme, meaning their rights are enshrined in law. We are not going to just kick people out, assuming they sign on to the scheme. And if they don't sign on to the scheme, one can only assume that they want to leave. The scheme is free, and they only need to complete 3 key steps. Prove their identity, show that they live in the UK, and declare any criminal convictions. Totally fair requirements. We need to know who you are, where you live, and see that you're not a criminal. I don't see how any decent law-abiding citizen could have any complaint with those requirements. And of course, you can do it online. So literally everyone can just load up the web page on their smartphones and take the time to do it. And they have until the 31st of December 2020 to do this. If you are an EU citizen who lives in the UK but is abroad when free movement ends, that's fine. EU citizens and their families would still be eligible for the EU settlement scheme because they live in the UK. No one eligible for status will be barred from re-entering the UK when free movement ends. Perfectly humane. Crystal clear. Unbelievably sensible. A common sense solution. This is precisely the sort of solution I personally would put into place. So I am very, very happy to see this on the Home Office's own website. Naturally, this has caused absolute hysteria in the globalist open borders Remain camp. Here is a Liberal Democrat MP, Ed Davey, spurging out in The Independent. Priti Patel's abrupt ending of freedom of movement would not only be morally wrong, it would cripple our NHS. Why? If we want doctors and nurses to come in, we will be able to allow doctors and nurses to come in. Also, it is not morally wrong. The thing that is morally wrong is to have open borders, because the reason that we need the requirement of what criminal convictions do you have is because we simply don't know. We do not know if we have been harbouring criminals, and one of the main problems with the Schengen area is criminals jumping borders. This is why the European Union has had to create the European arrest warrant, where you can be accused of a crime in one country and deported there by another. This is a nonsensical and tyrannical solution to a problem that the European Union has created with open borders. The alarm about a no-deal Brexit was already at chaos level, and not just from Remainers like Liberal Democrats, but primarily so. Go read the government's own analysis on Operation Yellowhammer. Now, that's a particularly strange and disingenuous thing to bring up. That is the government's analysis of the worst possible case scenario. It's not going to be worst possible case. All our allies abandon us. We can't get any drugs or fuel or food or anything like this. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But if it were to happen, it's sensible to have a plan, isn't it? But anyway, Priti Patel looks set to make chaos look attractive. She certainly does make unrepentant barbarism towards Remainers look attractive, doesn't she? Let's face it, the Home Office is not known for its efficiency, yet with no system in place to manage the end of free movement for 27 of our closest neighbours, and no future plans for them in the early stages, Britain's borders may well just shut down. Okay, calm down, buddy. Don't threaten me with a good time. But if you'd actually read the statement from the Home Office, they actually do have a plan for what's going to happen. They're going to be allowed to continue moving and applying for this until 2020. Nothing is going to happen to them. People who live here will be able to return here. It's really quite simple. I don't know why you have a problem with this. Actually, I do know why. It's because if you admit that Priti Patel actually has a fairly decent idea of what she's doing here, then that completely undermines the Liberal Democrat case for remain in the EU, doesn't it? But look at this nonsense. It's totally absurd that NHS workers could be held up returning to the UK, and families could be separated, purely because the Home Secretary wants to appear tough, even in the absence of a contingency plan. What are you talking about? She has said that they are not going to be held up. They are not going to be separated. Anyone living here will be able to come back here. What the hell about that don't you understand? And what's her boss doing? Boris Johnson pretends to care about the NHS, but a policy to end freedom of movement on 31st of October could well damage your local hospital and your local care homes. Well, could, will it or not? And as far as we can tell, there's no reason to think that it will. Your fear-mongering over a could makes you look hysterical and pointless. The NHS is already suffering with staff shortages. This new meltdown policy will make such serious problems even worse. Well, I tell you what, right? I think that the staff shortage problem will actually end up going away to some degree because of the fewer number of people who are something we could categorize as health tourists. People who have not paid into the system but are going to extract from the system and come from countries that do not have an NHS. These people come to our country because they know that we do, and that it's provided free at point of service, and that they won't be the ones fucking paying for it. If these people are prevented from coming to the UK because Genghis Patel is manning the borders, seems like it might solve the problem, to be honest. At least alleviate it somewhat. Is there a reason for this insanity? Well, it is the logic of a no-deal Brexit, and an extremely right-wing government preparing for an early election and playing to their anti-immigrant base. Do you mean the British public? Because the British public, at this point, are pretty anti-immigration, because they've had 20 years of open borders, and it's had some rather dire consequences. And I love the idea that it's a criticism that the Conservative Party might be extremely right-wing. I mean, they're not. They're just enacting common sense policies that will benefit the United Kingdom, which is obviously something a Remainer, a Liberal Democrat, an anti-nation activist would have a problem with. The Liberal Democrats cherish freedom of movement. Why? First, we believe in freedom, except the freedom to say certain things on the internet. Don't you say something hateful, you bigot. I mean, they're being led by someone who puts feminist in her bio on Twitter, so I'm not too surprised. But you believe in your version of freedom, which is the freedom to be locked up if you insult someone on the internet or offend someone on the internet. Freedom for people, British or European, to move across the European Union to work, live and love. Yeah, but we're not going to be in the European Union. So what you're saying is open borders to foreign countries. I think that's pretty ridiculous. Only someone who is opposed to the existence of a nation state in principle would say this. Second, freedom of movement has brought British citizens huge benefits, not least an immensely positive effect on our own public services and industries, as well as giving our own citizens the capacity to explore other countries at leisure. Wow, that's the most middle-class objection ever I can possibly imagine. Like, you might enjoy going on holiday to the south of France, but those people who holiday in Blackpool and Newquay might actually have a different worldview to you. They might have a different perspective on this. There is also a dramatically negative effect on our public services, on our industries. And we know this because since the Brexit referendum, hundreds of thousands of Europeans have just fucked off home. What's that done to, say, the construction industry? It's actually doing great for British people, which even The Guardian has to admit. Construction pay rises as EU workers weigh up leaving the UK. The average wage increases to £45,900. The average wage in the country is £22,000. That's amazing. This is such a success story. This is such good news for those blue-collar workers, you know, the kind of guys who use hammers. And hell, maybe they'll be able to afford that holiday to the south of France now. They might have to get a visa. Oh, goodness me. What can be done apart from, you know, applying online for a visa? In fact, look at the way that The Guardian has framed this. It's like they just don't understand how supply and demand works. The companies who construct things need those workers, and to attract workers, they're raising their wages. The figure rose from 42,300 in 2017 to now 45,900. That's over $3,500. Who doesn't want a pay increase of $3,500? Thank you very much, just out of interest. Why would you not want that? Look at this statement from Randstad's Owen Goodhead. The best senior site managers are earning close to an MP's salary. Well, that's good news for individuals. It's potentially not such great news for the economy. You mean the GDP? Fuck the GDP. Fuck it. I do not care that overall the GDP contracts if individually wages go up, because that is how we improve the quality of life of the people living in the UK. Our research shows that construction workers from overseas are being put off coming to the UK, and those that are here are thinking about moving elsewhere. We already know that a third of European construction workers who are here have considered leaving the UK due to Brexit. This should be a huge concern to industry leaders and the government, especially in the capital. Yeah, to them, fuck them. Fuck them. I want regular working class people to have a future, to have a ladder they can climb, to have success. So they can buy a house, so they can retire, so they can send their children to nice posh schools, so they become insufferable whiny leftists. This is good for them. Fuck industry leaders. What a fucking ridiculous concern. Well, I mean, it's good for the individual, but I mean, the GDP, my fucking GDP, fuck your GDP. Anyway, going back to the Liberal Democrat statement, for instance, the NHS relies on 20,000 nurses, 10,000 doctors, 14,000 clinical support staff from other EU countries. Okay, but I mean, let's be fair. That's a ladder that's been pulled up from working class people getting trained into those positions for a start. But secondly, we're not going to kick them out. Like, what do you think we're going to do? We're not just going to boot them out of the country. This has been very clear on the Home Office's statement on the subject. And in another independent article, the Liberal Democrats condemned the acceleration as brutal, warning that it exposed Ms. Patel as being completely detached from reality. Your reality, maybe, the fictional reality you live in, that literally does not correspond to what we can see happening in the real world, how are these industries going to survive? They're posting fewer jobs and all the wages have gone up. Well, that's good, isn't it? We will still need things built. I mean, the people who are earning these higher wages are going to buy things with that money, believe it or not. What do I have to explain basic economics to the Liberal Democrats for? Nicholas Hatton, head of the 3 million group of EU citizens in this country, said, "There are no systems in place and nothing is ready. This is a political gesture, but it will have a real impact on people's lives. Only people who aren't yet here, and they won't be able to just come here freely. They'll have to apply, and they'll have to go through a process. Admittedly, that process isn't in place yet, but we've got ages yet. They've got an entire year till they have to worry about this. And like we said, this is going to affect the people who already live here." He says this will open the doors to discrimination. Oh God, no, anything but discrimination. How will they distinguish between the legacy people, those already here, and those who will arrive afterwards? What sort of retarded question is that? The legacy people, those who are already here, have addresses? Like, they must be paying taxes, right? They're not illegal immigrants. They will have a fixed abode and a job. It sounds like many of them are already employed by the government, so it shouldn't even be very difficult for them to get that information. And in fact, the government's just asking them to provide it willingly. They'll sign up, put it in a database online, and then go about the rest of their day. Job done. And to distinguish between them and those who will arrive afterwards, we'll just check the date. And the thing is, Sajid Javid had dismissed this as not practical, but let's be fair, Priti seems to have laid out a pretty clear case, so maybe she's just more of a barbarian warlord than Sajid Javid is. Naturally, Jeremy Corbyn decried this as Windrush on steroids. Oh, fuck off, you old communist. On a visit to Stevenage to business engaged in no-deal preparation, Corbyn said, "Does this mean that a European Union national living in this country, possibly as a doctor, a nurse or a trauma surgeon, all kinds of things, goes home to see their family in Germany or the Czech Republic or wherever else, and they're not allowed back into the country? This is another Windrush on steroids." No. What the fuck is wrong with you? Why can't you just read their statement on the issue, where they clearly and concisely explain that yes, they will be allowed back in, Jeremy? I don't think this will be another Windrush on steroids, you absolute fruitcake. Which was incidentally done under Theresa May's Home Office, a weak, ineffectual Remainer. Also a feminist. A Home Office source said, "Anyone comparing ending freedom of movement with Windrush is either not in possession of the facts or deliberately stoking fear." Now that is a very good way of describing it. Which one is it, Jeremy? Now I'm willing to believe you are actually just a fucking idiot and you are not in possession of the facts, but then it is also likely that John McDonnell has whispered into your ear, and if it's him that has influenced you in this regard, I would believe that he was deliberately stoking fear. I mean, he is here to overthrow capitalism and whatnot. But the best thing about this is not only that Priti Patel is crushing her enemies, driving them before her, and hearing the lamentation of the Liberal Democrats, it's also that she's leaving the globalist establishment in absolute bafflement and confusion, which is incredibly powerful when you're fighting this kind of culture war for the spirit of Britain after Brexit. It is not clear exactly what the government intends to do. I disagree, Financial Times. It seems to be crystal clear what they intend to do. The Prime Minister's spokesman said the new approach would involve more stringent criminality checks on incoming migrants, but there's currently no mechanism to carry out such controls at the border. Okay, well then they'll just create one, won't they? But anyway, either way, this is a massive power move for Priti Patel. She's managed to get all of her opponents on the back foot, spewing out provably incorrect things that they can just say, well, you're either a liar or just an idiot. So pick one, Jeremy Corbyn and the Liberal Democrats. And it's exactly what the public want them to do. It is a popular idea to limit immigration in Britain. This is a move that demonstrates such strength, I can hardly believe it's coming from the Conservative Party. But then, before this, I have to admit, I didn't know anything about Priti Patel.